Hello, and welcome to the Men Human Rights Discord server. We are the semi-official Discord server of the Men's Rights subreddit. This is our Saturday live stream chat that we do every Saturday. So this week we are doing a continuation of a topic from about a week ago. This topic was an article called 23 Ways Feminism Has Made the World Better for Men. And it lists 23 ways that feminism believes they made the world a better place for men. The article is quite old, but it's sort of just taking a look at how feminism viewed itself, and to a certain degree slightly still views itself. So we left off at number 11, we left off ending at 10, so we'll be starting at 11 and going down. So if anyone wants to read.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, this is the next one on the list is the one about civil rights. And, do you want to keep reading? Yes, it does, Taz. Do you want to keep reading it yourself?
It made the struggle of number 11. It made the struggle for civil rights a reality. Women of color didn't only participate in the civil rights movement, they were at the forefront of it. Without their sweat, blood, and tears, the movement wouldn't have been successful, and yet their participation is often understated. Even the role of iconic figures like Rosa Parks have been diminished in popular culture. Although we often remember her as a single-cause activist, refusing to give up her seat to a white person in a bus, she dedicated her entire life to racial injustice, among many other things. Parks spent many years serving as an officer of a local chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and was intensely involved in the Scottsboro Boys trial. Brittany Cooper, assistant professor of women's and gender studies / Africana studies at Rutgers University, says that women are invaluable in the struggle for equal rights. There's no civil rights struggle without the labor of women. Young women and girls disproportionately were on the front lines of school desegregation efforts, she told Policy Mike. The Montgomery bus boycott, for instance, would have been impossible without women. Cooper explains it was successful in large measure because of Joanne Robinson and the Women's Political Council. She also believes Polly Murray and Ruth Bader Ginsburg were incremental because they helped ensure that the word sex made into the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Okay, so as you may have noticed, this is a bait and switch. At no point does the role of feminism in any of this come up. What they're doing is they're saying that black women are feminism. Like, they are the ideology of feminism. So they represent the ideology of feminism, and therefore anything they do is feminist, which is a rabbit hole they shouldn't really want to go down, because, like, not every person is a good person. So, like, you can't just claim the good bits. But anyway, it's fallacious anyway. It is a bait and switch. They're taking one completely different group and they're claiming all the things they've done. It's just like there's no point even really addressing this. There's no feminism here. There's black women. There were also white women in the civil rights movement. There were black men. There were white men. There were all sorts of people. There's no real citation for saying that they were at the forefront. It's really just a claim, and it's not even a very good one. And we see again from last time, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is being claimed as like a face of feminism, but honestly, this is an example of them doing this thing they call representation. But what they are really doing is group identity politics. So basically, what they're doing is they're taking people they like from a particular group and trying to say this is the entire group, this represents the group, and this is we're claiming this victory basically, and it's a logical canyon. There is no connection here between a particular race of people and this ideology.
I think it's because they don't know what they are. Feminism is a movement that is honestly undefined because you have people who say feminism is equality for everyone, and that includes men, LGBTQ, every single race. It doesn't matter. And then you got some people who are feminists who view it as a women's only movement. And so everything to do with women is involved in there. And you got people who say, oh, feminism is whoever calls themselves a feminist. And so because there are leaders who all have different opinions of what feminism is on the movement, there's no real line to feminism. And so then you have situations like this where they're just considering everything done by a woman ever is feminism. It was a feminist action, which isn't entirely true.
It comes back to the old thing that Karen Strawn said, wasn't it? Fighting feminism is like sword fighting a fart. You really don't know what you're actually dealing with in the end.
Yeah.
Because if there are people that claim to be feminists that will say, "Oh no, whoever committed that bad thing wasn't actually a feminist," and it just goes round and round in circles. So, I think anything said in the name of feminism should be taken with a large dose of salt. I would suggest maybe sort of Pacific Ocean sized dose of salt.
Taz, if you want to read the next one, you can.
All right, thanks. Y'all hear me okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Number 12, it kept prisons safer for male inmates. The graphic there showing two images of the same man, asking if you would joke around about the man being raped, and one in street clothes, the other in prison togs, and over prison togs it says, "How about now?" Anti-sexual violence efforts don't just benefit women, they often provide accountability and services for male victims of rape as well. The Prison Rape Elimination Act of 2003, spearheaded by prominent feminist activist Lavisa Stanow, advocated for the 200,000 inmates who are sexually abused in U.S. prisons and jails every year, most of whom are men. The organization she heads, Just Detention International, also helped draft and get the bill through Congress. Thanks to the tireless efforts of Stanow, who used to work as the executive director of the Pacific Institute for Women's Health, the federal government must carry out a comprehensive statistical review and analysis of the incidence and effect of prison rape for each calendar year. This mandate extends to prisons, jails, juvenile facilities, military jails, and Indian country facilities.
Now, if this is true, then we'll say good for them. That's great, but I don't think this is really true. I think this is another example of them pushing for a law for women, and that law being applied equally to men. And it's worth bringing up again that in countries like India and Israel, feminists have fought very hard to keep rape of men legal. And they have fought very hard in the UK to make sure that rape of men by women isn't considered rape. It's considered something like intercourse without consent or something is the law. It's like being forced to have sex against your will is the name or something. But in America, it's I'm a little less clear on what they've been actually been doing because it varies from state to state. But they have overall done an awful lot to try and make sure that male rape victims don't get heard. For example, Mary Koss and her infamous "men can't be raped, they can just be sexually touched against their will." So any kind of rape against a man is just unwanted sexual contact. So, which is why you have things like the CDC studies, because Mary Koss was a major player in the CDC. She made sure that rape of men is considered a form of sexual assault called made to penetrate, and so the CDC can happily say that only men rape men. It's kind of, I hesitate to use the word barbaric because it's more sophisticated than that, but it's a kind of sophisticated bigotry. Really, it's, what else can I say?
Yeah, that's and this whole article, is so kind of U.S. centric, and doesn't really examine anything going on outside the U.S. But the one thing that these people do that is consistently effective, and Ma, you pointed it out earlier, is they keep it a moving target, right? They ensure that no matter what the critique is, they can always say, well, that's not my position, that's not my feminism, whatever the case may be, it's not true feminism. And like I said, it keeps it all a very moving target. And this this kind of criminal activity against men, which is, I mean, let's face it, it's equally perpetrated by other men and women. That's not even discussed in the article or in this section. It still focuses on the behavior of men, right? And really, that's the one card that they are always able to play effectively, is to simply, make sure the focus is never on the behavior in general, but specifically, the antisocial behavior of any woman anywhere. And the reason it's effective is because, the general population, and specifically most men, fall for it. They don't recognize when their attention is being turned away from, that behavior. So that's why they do it. I mean, from a completely amoral and dispassionate point of view, they do it because it's effective. It works. And you'll notice what happens when anybody, of any gender, starts persisting in pointing out that kind of behavior. Okay, they become very hostile, they become very unresponsive, and they become very dismissive. And they work again to try to pull the focus away from, the person behind the curtain, so to speak. Because, like I said, if they persist at it, it always works.
Dark,
It's
would you
always
like
effective. Go ahead.
Dark, would you like to explain the links you just put up? Because I don't think I have time to read through them both.
Yeah, well, I put on because it was talking. I saw this like way ahead of time. I had these prepared because I knew this was coming up. The prison safer for male inmates, and so I put two articles. They're both obviously U.S. centric about situations in U.S. State prisons. Granted, as you said, one of the big problems is it differs a lot depending on state. State of Illinois, our prisons are a lot better, but this is Georgia and Florida, which are known for probably the worst possible prisons ever. And Georgia has been having a complete crisis. I was thinking of putting in a more recent article where they had, what was it? It was Georgia State Prison, and they collected like over 1,000 items, contraband, from the guards. And then this article from Georgia State Prison is about how there's been 125 suicides within just about a year to 2 year period in about 2017, 2018. And then the other one was about how recently there's been heat waves going on, and Florida State Prison doesn't have AC. AC being air conditioning. And so these inmates are dying from record high heat in Florida State Prison. And so there's just been, they're trying to make reform, but, feminism is in charge of that reform. People in general are fighting for this reform. All people. And on top of that, as I said, you've got these states where it's still completely horrible. In Georgia, in some of the Georgia state prisons and Alabama state prisons, they don't know how to properly take care of inmates with mental disabilities, so they lock them in solitary for 22 hours a day as their way of taking care of them. So it hasn't honestly gotten better depending what state you're in. And also, I just want to add to Taz's point, I think this is another shortcoming when it comes to feminism, is the ideas of feminism are around the world, but the more modern feminism that we see honestly comes from the US. We brought in Muhammad once here, who was a member we had a while ago, and he was talking about Lebanon, how they have UN schools, and the UN schools are very feminist-sided, but their feminist-siding is very US-like. Because if you notice, International VAWA came from US VAWA, and it was supported by US politicians. And the problem with that is the US lacks an understanding of the world outside of itself. It lacks in understanding and acceptance of other cultures which differ from itself. And it sort of just pushes its own agenda in many ways. We see that with the way it's taking care of the Middle East and other countries. Is it didn't make any room to maybe learn and accept that there are certain things that won't be able to change because that's the culture of that country. And so that's a big problem, I think, at least with more modern feminism we see that gets spread around the world, is they're all basing it off the US example, but the US example doesn't fit their country because the US example is based off US traditions, customs, basically their morals, beliefs, which highly differs across the seas.
This is why you go into Irish universities and you'll find these same woke people saying that, for example, they have to apologize for their history of colonialism and keeping black people as slaves, so on and so forth. When in actual fact, the Irish were the slaves. They were treated pretty much like slaves. They were starved to death and so on and so forth. But all this history is forgotten, and they won't, they won't talk about that. Instead, they'll blame and spread it around. I mean, you could go into Protestant schools in Northern Ireland where people still identify as English. Sorry, I shouldn't say Protestant because it's actually the English and Scots who they identify with up there, and their heritage is Scottish and English. and you could say that they have an imperialist history of taking over Ireland, destroying the language, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, those people still don't, like, it's the same sort of gender blaming, race blaming that you have throughout the feminism. Like, it's all about groups and groups and groups, which is why they're doing articles about this as well. They're trying to say that your group is benefiting from our group's actions, therefore our group's actions are good, and stuff like that. Do you want to move on to the next one?
We probably should.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where we're not getting through this quick enough. What about Taz? Do you want to read this one, or Painter?
I got it. Okay, number 13. It enabled men to spend more time with their children. That women can bring home a pretty big chunk of change through paid work means men can work less and spend more time with their kids, something that's good for both children and their fathers. The time fathers spend with their children is not only rewarding, it's also more purposeful and contributes to happiness more than time spent working. Thanks to feminist activism, paternity leave exists and more men are taking advantage of it.
Now, to an extent, this one might actually be true. There's just a little problem. And that problem is that feminism has also destroyed the family. And it has, well, I mean, we have people here who can attest to that, honestly.
Yeah, you see how carefully they omit the word husband.
Because hasn't feminism really increased single motherhood in general? And then they talk later on about how, like, people with more contact with their father, they're having better educational attainment, less, I don't know if they said less jail time, but since feminism has increased single motherhood so much, and that's correlated with decreased education and higher crime rates, I mean, it's really contraindicative to me.
Well, like I said, it's they tell me that it's one thing to be a father, either with or without paternity leave, but it's something else entirely to be with and be part of a family. The thing that, I have been fortunate enough not to experience, but what I hear the most about in men's rights discussions is, it's just ridiculously precarious position of any father, anywhere in the West. It's like it just, spends a lifetime looking over his shoulder. The best possible outcome is, that they don't come for him. Like, I still don't understand how fatherhood is worth all that, but that's just me, I guess.
Wasn't it also the feminists who fought for things like no-fault divorce, so it made marriages easier to get out of? Also, they're neglecting to mention things like the tender years doctrine, which states, obviously, in the event of a relationship ending, that the child is better off with the mother than the father, despite the fact statistically that's probably not actually true. So it's more smoke and mirrors and more BS, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And people ask me why, I'm so persistent in saying for men, none of this is worth it. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's not. If this article, and I keep my eyes open, I look for anything like a follow-up to kind of bring the feminist position on men up to date, because this is old, and really there's nothing, you know. Well, like I said, you know, I know that, you know, a lot of guys come into the men's movement, you know, really after, you know, all of this has fallen on their head, and they really feel trapped. And, you know, my response to that is, well, you feel trapped because you are, you know, you're a second-class citizen, and, you know, until enough time goes by where you can be free of that, that's what you're going to be. You know, you're not going to be a husband. You're not going to be the head of a household. You're not going to be part of a household. You know, you're not going to have equal standing when inevitably you make your way to court. Okay, you're going to be, you know, the scapegoat. You're going to be the whipping boy. And, you know, like I say, I wish there was more, you know, more positive news I could deliver, but I just don't think there is.
Okay, moving on to the next one.
I'll read it. The National Organization for Women, along with many other social justice organizations, lead the efforts to change the definition of hate crimes to include gender, sexual orientation, and disability. The Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act was passed in 2009 in Congress and expanded the scope of what counts as a hate crime. Before this law, only unlawful acts on the basis of race, religion, and national origin were included in the category. Expanding what is considered a hate crime has offered well-deserved protection to the LGBTQ community under federal law.
Well, like we said before, if that's true, and I'm not sure if it is or not, but if that's true, then good. That's one little thing that they've done that's good, and we can praise them for that as we point out all the other horrible things they've done to us. But I mean, it does seem an awful lot like they're nipping in right at the end, ignoring feminism's long history of homophobia, and saying, oh look, we did this nice thing for you after you did all the work. Because it wasn't women who were out, you know, with placards back when being gay was illegal, trying to make it legal.
I would say continuing to a certain degree, specifically the trans people.
But it's funny, isn't it? Because there's a trans exclusionary arm of the feminist movement, and again, that's not being discussed. And a lot of the rhetoric around trans women in particular is actually based in misandry. It's fear of men and a hatred of men that's pushing it.
Mhm.
When you know, we don't want trans women in women's only bathrooms. Well, why not? Because they think of them as men, and they think that men by nature are sexual predators and everything else, which is, you know, absolute nonsense. You don't see the same kind of rhetoric being aimed at trans men, for example. And there have been conversations not conversations, but trans men have been speaking out about their experiences of life after transitioning and how things are different. So, you know, this again, it's more smoke and mirrors, it's more BS, it's, you know.
It's more confusion too, because it's like you have the issue against trans women because the fact that they were men, and especially the ones who transition later, there's the argument of how much of an advantage are they given since they transition so much later in life and they've already hit puberty or are past it, and people want to discriminate against them due to the fact that they were males or still have certain body structures of male. And yet, at the same time, those who support trans women try to claim that any hate against them is misogyny.
The feminists, the TERFs I know, will literally say that men are using their privilege to take over female spaces and destroy female sports and things like that by shoving themselves into them, by being trans. And I mean, while there is an argument for physical capabilities, meaning that you should have a separate trans category for athletes, it's a very, very like paranoid, anti-male, like a disgust of men that's really driving this. It's yeah.
I
mean,
think
as
it's
much
also
as
just a lot of like jealousy and anger when it comes to the sports world specifically. I think it's a lot of jealousy and anger because I saw an article recently about what's her name, Lisa Thompson, the swimmer, and they were talking about how some of the swimmers she swam against, the specific one she tied with, thought it was unfair that she got to compete, but she didn't have this opinion until after she got beat by Lisa Thompson, and it seemed like it was just a jealousy of the fact that they had lost.
Well, anyway, moving on to the next one. What about Taz? Would you like to read this one or paint?
I'll go. Number 15, it helped shatter stereotypes about HIV/AIDS patients. Did you know that women were deeply involved in demanding justice for AIDS victims in the 1980s? Princess Diana, for instance, was hailed as a feminist icon for her involvement in radical causes like HIV. She was also first high-profile figure to be photographed touching a person with the disease and to have HIV/AIDS charities among her patron charities, something that had a pivotal impact on the public perception of AIDS. HIV does not make people dangerous to know. You can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it. The royal once told reporters, at a time where many fervently believed the disease could be transmitted through simple contact, challenging the commonly held notion that patients with gay men were to blame for AIDS, were to blame for their illness. Princess Diana made sure to embrace patients, including gay men. Although the demographics of AIDS have drastically changed over time, homosexual men were disproportionately affected in the 80s, so much so that the disease was labeled gay cancer. And if Princess Diana's commitment to helping men with AIDS isn't enough to convince you, the major AIDS-fighting drug was actually also invented by a woman.
There you go again. They're trying to smuggle feminism into it by saying it was done by women. So you start off with, did you know that women were deeply involved? Well, good for them. Men were deeply involved as well. Diana was hugging AIDS patients and things like that. Good for her. She sounds like a great person. But that doesn't make her a feminist. I don't know if she is or not. I don't think I've ever heard anyone quote her as saying she was one or not. But you can't just claim people because they are women and say that that makes them feminist. And you can't say that they did things in the name of feminism because they are women. It just doesn't work like that.
Should we move on to the next point?
Sure. Kathleen, you haven't read any out. Would you like to try one? Kathleen? No? Okay. Anyone else?
I'll do it again. And ensure that men get the vital reproductive health services. Planned Parenthood may have been founded by a woman and be generally perceived as a women's health organization, but it provides services for men too. Planned Parenthood VP of Communications Eric Ferrero told Policy Mike that although a large number of men come to offer support for their female partner, many show up to get the vitally important services they need. Planned Parenthood health centers provide preventive health care for men, including testing and treatment of STDs, including HIV testing, and sexual health information education. In fact, in the last 10 years, Planned Parenthood has more than doubled the number of male patients we see nationwide for health issues that affect men, Farrow told Policy Mike. According to Planned Parenthood's records, their male client base increased by a whopping 83% between 2002 and 2012. And this doesn't just extend to certain types of men. It's all men, whether they are straight, gay, bisexual, queer, or trans. There's a real effort to integrate programs and services geared towards trans men and women and members of the LGBTQ community. For instance, Planned Parenthood Mar Monte has a program for trans patients, while Planned Parenthood Ithaca offers specific services for LGBTQ folks. The organization also works to answer questions from the trans community, like this query from a man asking for birth control that can get rid of his period without increasing his estrogen intake. Farrow couldn't be prouder of his organization's role in helping men. At Planned Parenthood, we realized that our incredible patients and supporters don't compromise any one identity, and we're grateful for the many men, volunteers, staff, and supporters who work every day to ensure that people in communities across the country get the health care and information they need, he said.
Well, that was very vague, but I mean, I guess if they're helping men, then, in some way with medical stuff, then yay, good for them. I mean, I don't know what medical stuff that means, but
I think the problem is this is another example of what we were talking about earlier with feminism and stuff. Planned Parenthood is not a feminist organization. It is a medical organization that's main focus is reproductive health and offering services for that at very low prices or free. I don't know everyone agrees with abortion, but they do offer abortions, which is the big thing everyone puts with them. But Planned Parenthood offers a lot of services on reproductive health that are very low cost or completely free, which helps out people that are communities to get help. But they're not a feminist organization. They're just a reproductive health organization.
Okay. Well, putting aside the entire abortion issue completely, I do think that they should be wary of claiming this particular organization because of its history of racism. And, this is this thing again. It's like, yay, they want to claim the good bits, but no, they can't claim the bad bits. And so they're basically skirting around. I mean, to this day, from what I gather, Planned Parenthood, they have lots of facilities in predominantly black neighborhoods. And its founder was a eugenicist who wanted to use abortion to wipe out black people, basically, or to at least control them. So it's kind of, let's say that they wouldn't necessarily want to claim everything from that company, and move on, perhaps. Who wants to read the next one?
Kaz, you're unmuted. You want to read it?
Yeah. Number 18. It protected men's precious marbles during sports.
No, number 17.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, yeah, I was hoping to avoid that. It built a more inclusive world, one feminist celebrity at a time, with a picture of Beyonce. You may not be aware of it, but the feminist pop icon Beyonce has helped men, and not just because she encouraged their girlfriends to believe they woke up like this. The singer has gone out of her way to put her support behind the LGBTQ community and gay men in particular. When Queen Bey's not crushing the patriarchy, she's crushing heteronormativity by ensuring that her products don't reinforce stereotypes about who's who we're supposed to love. For instance, her Valentine's Day couples underwear kits offered the product with a healthy dose of diversity. Instead of simply coming in male and female options, she made a male and female varieties to include all couples. She's also been vocal about the cherished place gay men have in her heart. I've always had a connection with my gay fans. Most of my audience is actually women and my gay fans, and I've seen a lot of the younger boys kind of grow up to my music. It's great when I'm able to do the meet and greets because I'm able to really connect and have conversations, she told Pride Source.
Can I tell a quick related story to this?
Go on.
Okay, this is gonna be interesting. So, granted, this is old. I'll be honest. This is a couple years old. This is a good 5-6 years old, I think, the story. So, on The View, which is a TV show we have here in America, where it's like multiple women. I think now it's 2 African American and the rest are white. Maybe they have a Latina now. I don't know. I haven't watched. And they basically just go over like celebrity news and things happening in the world. They had an episode a couple years back on Beyonce because her sister and Jay-Z were in an elevator, and out of nowhere, her sister slapped the living daylights out of Jay-Z out of nowhere. Now, supposedly it's believed that he might have said something, and in the recording you see his mouth move, but you don't see him do a violent action or anything. He's just walking away completely normally, not aggressive, nothing. Out of nowhere, Beyonce's sister slaps the daylights out of him. Super hard. And Beyonce does nothing. She just stands there and watches her sister repeatedly slap him. And The View went over this clip on live TV. They were watching it and they were talking about it. Whoopi Goldberg brought up, because all her fellow co-hosts were saying, oh, he probably deserved that, though, to get slapped. And saying that men aren't supposed to hit women, etc., etc. And Whoopi Goldberg spoke up and she said, no, everyone deserves to slap anybody else in self-defense. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or not. If someone slaps you, you have the right to slap back in self-defense. There's no special accommodations. You don't slap people. If you want to do it, well, then don't be surprised when you get slapped back. And all our co-hosts were trying to make supposed reasons for why men shouldn't slap women. Not a single one of them could come up with a good reason. And then a couple weeks later, they suspended her off the show for a while. For quote-unquote
They suspended
extreme
Whoopi?
beliefs. Yeah, for a short while.
For extreme
For
beliefs.
quote-unquote extreme beliefs.
Wasn't it? She said, "Don't expect men to have this chivalry thing in them anymore."
She said that
Okay.
at one point too. I think within that same period as well. But she'd also,
forgetting, of course, that chivalry actually has nothing to do with men's treatment of women, and has everything to do with men's treatment of men. But that's a side issue or a side story at the end of the day. And it's just, I mean, that particular incident is a normalization of women's violence against men.
And Beyonce just normalized it. So there you go. Your supposed feminist icon who's so inclusive just let her husband get the freaking
get the life slapped out of him by her sister for it doesn't matter at the end of the day what he said. She shouldn't have hit him. And I'm sorry, but there are men in this world who would have slapped her back and probably, put her on her backside to the point where she didn't want to get up. Whether or not she was able is another story. So, the moral of that particular story is don't go hitting people. But it's seen as acceptable when a woman does it to a man, especially if she thinks she's being disrespected in some way, shape, or form. So, but the whole thing with equality is, if women want to be treated like men, fine, we will treat you like men. And any man alive will tell you, you overstep the mark with another man, and you're likely to get your head put through your shoulders. It's just the way it works, as it's something we all understand, essentially.
Yeah, it is interesting. They try to claim the good stuff, but they don't even know what the good stuff is, because if any MRA reading that piece of the article is just going to have a little internal cringe at the whole smashing the patriarchy thing, and it's very trite. It's very, it's very trite's probably the wrong word. Very twee. That's the word I'm thinking of. It's very twee, and it's very, just put your hand to your face and go, "Good grief." I mean, I do support that she does underwear packs for gay men and lesbians. Cool, that's great. But the other stuff, not such a fan. Do we want to move on to the next one? Because the next one's kind of funny.
No. Who wants to read the next one?
I'll go. Number 18, it protected men's precious marbles during sports. Next time you get a huge hit down there, you should thank precious womankind because the inventor of the jockstrap is one of them. Without feminism, female inventors would have never been able to leave the kitchen to create things that many men use every day. While we're on the topic, women also invented TV dinners, the first computer, and Jell-O. In other words, your best Friday ever is basically brought to you by feminism.
Wasn't the computer invented by, was it Charles Babbage? And what's
Yeah. He called it a difference engine, and it was mechanical. But yeah, that was the first computer.
And it was Alan Turing who developed what we now know as computer science. And every single computer basically worked on the concept that he wrote. So what a load of trash at the end of the day. This thing of also, it's conflating woman with feminist. The two are mutually exclusive. You can be a feminist and not be a woman, or you can be a woman and not be a feminist. So, it's a nice little trick, and it's easy for people to believe that the two are interconnected, which is also how feminism gets away with this whole attack on MRAs and anti-feminists, because they say, well, you just hate women, because they conflate the two together. And it's, stupid. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, so let's go through this actually. The jockstrap was invented in 1874 by C.F. Bennett. I don't know who C.F. Bennett was. It doesn't actually specify a gender there. But since they didn't actually say, and this is Wikipedia, and Wikipedia is very feministy, I'm pretty sure that means that it was probably a man who invented it. But if it was a woman, then sure, great. What they usually do with this sort of stuff is they'll take an invention that a man made and improve on it, and then feminists will go around saying that it was invented by a woman when the improvement was made by a woman. They do this all the time. There was like some feministy thing saying that the light bulb was invented by this black man who merely created some sort of improvement on it. It's that sort of stuff. There's if they actually, if they make an improvement, that's awesome. If they invent it, that's awesome. We don't really, that's great. Celebrate that. But lying is not good. Lying is not helpful. Lying doesn't give these people their legacy. It doesn't help them at all. It doesn't make them better people. All it does is set these people up, and then somebody will go and look into it and realize they've been lied to and call it out, and then this person is in the muck.
Just having a quick look on the internet while you're just chatting there, human. C.F. Bennett, was it? He's Charles. So yes, it's actually invented by a man. So, you know, I'm just trying to find. Yeah, Charles Bennett was to make his jockstrap all elastic, including the waistband and leg straps. This supposedly happened in 1874. I say supposedly because I haven't found any documents to prove this. From circumstantial evidence, I suggest the 1874 date is true. So, yeah.
1874 predates feminism. Like, there would have been suffragettes around at that point, but, you know.
And obviously, we're not trying to knock the female of the species, as it were, or women, but, you know, this whole saying women and feminists are the same thing and women have done this, that, and something else when they actually haven't, then, you know, just stop lying.
I mean, I've heard that them say that Watson and Crick didn't actually discover the structure of DNA. It was actually this woman. But I've also heard that it wasn't actually this woman. She was just using their research or something, and she discovered something or other. I can't remember what it was, but she did make some sort of discovery, but it wasn't the structure of DNA. And, you know, they were all saying that Watson Crick stole her research and stuff. It's all just an attempt to rewrite history because they don't believe in facts, they believe in narratives. And it's not helpful to women. It's setting up women as a paper tiger, and then, you know, you're just going to blow that paper tiger down, and that hurts the image of women. It's like, this is why you shouldn't lie about things, especially big things. Moving on to the next one.
Yeah, do you want me to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so number 19, it's made men's lives happier and better.
Try and read it with a straight face.
You know me well, sir. One of the most fascinating side effects of the women's lib is that it's correlated with a decrease in female life satisfaction, partly or partially due to the fact that the expansion of women's roles didn't come with an appropriate shift in the amount of work they do in the home. We'll get to that one in a second. What often overshadows these findings is that men's happiness actually went up as a result of women's empowerment. The happiness gap could be due to many factors, one of them being that women sharing the burden of breadwinning has helped men worry and spend less time at work, or leaving women with the double day burden. And before you say that feminism has made women unhappy, take a look at this research that shows that feminist women score higher on the happiness index. Feminism equals happiness for all. It's time we face the facts. Oh, for goodness sake, please. Somebody take me out the back and shoot me now.
It's certainly not made him happier. So, since they're using singular anecdotal examples, I guess that's case closed.
Yeah. You know, men's suicide rates have been inexorably increasing since, I would say, feminism has come into being. Women are less happier today than they have ever been. This whole thing of, you know, women having double duty when they get home is completely ignoring the domestic work that men do, which is often outside of the home or on the actual home itself, whether that be decorating, minor building works, you know, gardening, working on cars or bikes or what have you. And that's not even obviously including the stuff that they do outside of the home with children when it comes to things like teaching them to ride bikes or fishing or whatever. It's another trick of feminism that is designed to rile people up, and unfortunately, it works every single time. And I wish people would just take a step back and actually think about what is going on. But quite often, it's feelings over reality.
Let's just say that, like, we have evidence. Well, not just evidence. We have a confession from a feminist journal saying that feminists threw men under the bus. They threw male domestic violence victims under the bus to help women, and they said it was necessary. And that should just tell you everything. Like, they constantly throw men under the bus. It's their modus operandi.
Is there any kind of follow-up on what happened to that particular feminist after she said that?
Oh, the one in the journal?
Yeah.
I have no idea, but since it's actually still up in the journal, I have to imagine that they just sort of passed that by without ever... Like, they published it in this journal, so... Yeah. I mean, the thing is that I don't think they actually realise it's an admission, because the language, you have to... you don't have to read between the lines because it's extremely overt. But it reads in very feminist terms, so it's telling you exactly what they did, but at the same time, it's kind of hard to explain. You really have to read it. It's on our citation list under domestic violence if you want to check it out. You can find that in the description of the YouTube video. But shall we move on to the next one? Because I have to go very soon.
I'll read it.
Long God!
Hold on.
What's this man now? What's him, Dad? What's it? You know what's happened.
I don't know what that was about. Dark, could you just read it?
20. It demanded that the media change its representation of men. Increasing media literacy and challenging the stereotypical representations of men and women on television and film helps all genders develop the skills to think critically about the representations we see in our everyday life. With growing pressure on men to be strong, muscular, and absolutely flawless, many feminist organizations have been dedicated to drawing awareness to how stereotypes impact all genders. The Representation Project is one of them. One of the many projects they have in the works is a documentary called The Mask You Live In, which explores how toxic masculinity can be for young boys. The movie highlights the voices of male feminist experts like Michael Kimmel and Jackson Katz. Oh. Wow.
I'm glad you chuckled at that last part then, Darkeisha, because, yeah, the article just lost any kind of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Credibility.
Yeah, thank you, Taz, yeah. It's lost any kind of credibility just bringing up those two names.
Not that credibility win. Oop, down the chute. While examining why adolescent boys are 7 times more likely to die at their own hands than girls, and why the dropout rates for males are so high. Well, I wonder.
I actually watched that. I actually watched that documentary end to end, and it's one of those things where they don't present it in such a way that can be factually challenged. But what it comes out to is the kind of victim blaming that it provides you with a no-win situation. It's basically saying, here is the condition and the struggle of especially young men in the 21st century. And here is how it is their own doing and their own fault, and their, the end point is prison, or suicide, or, slow suicide by addiction, overwork, whatever the case may be. And again, no discussion of the influence or the conditioning, that those same young men are subject to, from society at large, the adult women in their lives. It's never part of the film. And like I said, that's, they do it that way because it's effective. It works. It cons everyone into thinking that, the male of the species is just damned to be what it is, and there's nothing anyone can do about it.
I'm just going to bring something up here, Taz. If masculinity and everything else were toxic, we would not have had that conversation that we had last Sunday. And if masculinity was also toxic, then young men would not be far better off with a father in the home than they actually, having a father in the home would make things worse, not better. And statistically, having a father in the home makes things a darn sight better.
Right. And the response to that would be, we're not saying masculinity is toxic. We are saying that, an excess of certain kinds of masculinity is toxic. And of course, nobody comes back with, okay, so in order to fix that, we do what? And that's the thing they never have an answer for. Because that takes them into territory that, it challenges, the reality of human nature, right? Men as a demographic are, we are constituted differently than women. There's nothing, they're right to say there's nothing we can do about that. I was born, I continue to be, and will always be a man. Now, I have done everything I can to, quote, detoxify, and, I'm what comes out the other side, guys, and according to the consensus, I'm the extreme example. I'm the standoff, and the standout, because I live the way I do. And I'm like, well, this is what you get.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong here, but obviously it's the mytho-poets that originally came up with the term toxic masculinity, and it was to do with the same sort of behaviours that the likes of Jackson Katz and Michael Kimmel themselves indulge in.
Yeah.
Over the over-pedalization of women and all this sort of stuff, and we also cannot forget that Michael Kimmel was a couple of years ago Me Too'd and was basically black booked out of the conversation. So, whether or not he's guilty of the things he's accused of is obviously another story. But hearing that he was Me Too did put a smile on my face, and it should put a smile on the face of anybody who ever saw the Red Pill movie.
Right. And yeah, the Schadenfreude and the smile on the face is kind of one thing, but I personally, I'm not in this to be entertained. The only use somebody like Michael Kimmel is to me is someone to point to and say, this is what you've wrought. This is the kind of man, that supports your positions. And I'm like, he's a human being. I'm sure his mom loves him and whatever. He must have good points somehow. But is he really the answer, that feminism is looking for? That's it's like, if that's what we have to do, then I don't think we're going to make it. I can't be like that guy. I can't be that two-faced and double-tongued, and unbalanced. And most of the men I know, they can't either. It's like that's, and Jackson Katz is another one. I mean, that
Like
guy
Michael
is just a terrorist.
You got Michael Flood on Twitter basically stepping around and justifying Sally Miller Gerhardt saying that 90% of the male population should be done away with. Like, this was just last week I was having this conversation with him. So, you can talk directly to these people online and they'll tell you awful things to your face that just have disgusting implications.
Right.
But anyway, I've got to go. The next entry is more of the same. The last entry is some weird thing about immigration that doesn't really mean anything because, honestly, when it comes to immigration, like legal immigrants and saving them, they go after the women and children. But, Dark, if you could take us out, please.
Yeah. This has been the Men Human Rights Discord server. This has been our Saturday live stream. We have this every Saturday at 9 a.m. Central, which is 3 p.m. UK, or 10 a.m. Eastern. We always love hearing what you guys have to say. These topics are very interesting. We can't wait to see you guys next week. And as always, if you ever have recommendations for topics, you can always tell Men Are Human, Blue Orange, or myself. We will see you all next week. Goodbye.